Good morning, MVUU. Welcome, everyone, to MVUU. Welcome to those of you who are sitting here with me. You may have noticed that we've added a few chairs to the sanctuary this week because our numbers are ever increasing, both with new members, visitors, and I do spot a few snowbirds out there in the audience. Does that have anything to do with the fact that there was a hard freeze in the Midwest last week, that people are coming back to us? I also want to extend a very warm welcome to those of you who are joining us via Zoom. How many screens do we have today? 20 screens. So in addition to everybody who's sitting there, we have all these people at home too. Let us welcome each other by first waving to the camera, and then trying to make eye contact and waving to someone who's maybe a couple rows away from you or on the other side of the sanctuary. Let's wave to the camera, welcome those who are at home, and now try to make eye contact and wave with somebody. Great. This is a welcoming congregation in so many ways. I hope that those of you who have recently found their way here feel welcomed, no matter who you are, where you're from, or what your previous religious affiliation was. We are better and we are stronger because we are here together. This congregation is served by the Reverend Matthew Funk Query, who is preaching today at Sky Island, the UU congregation in Sierra Vista, while their minister, the Reverend Tina Squire, will be preaching to us today. Welcome, Reverend Tina. Many of you have met Reverend Tina virtually in the past through our Baja 4 services, but now today's your chance to get to meet her in person. She has served Sky Island for 4 years, and prior to that, she was a chaplain at a local hospice for 10 years. Because her father was a foreign service officer, she was able to live in 2 countries with him, and then in a third with her husband when he served in the army. And she speaks Russian. And she has lived in Sierra Vista for almost 17 years with her husband and her 2 now teenagers, her sons. She will be talking to us today about change as we continue with our desert theme. We are also very lucky to have Chris Tackett as our music director. And what would we do without our crack AV crew, masterminds Lee and Todd McNeely? And today we have Chuck on camera, and we have Ann Tatum and Susan Alexander doing something with technology back there. Thank you to you all. It does indeed take a village. So, change. What changes have you been noticing lately? The change in the weather is certainly obvious and welcome, as we are now able to spend more time outside. Another change for me is that I now have to walk my buddy Ginger. Instead of after supper, I have to get her out before supper because it gets too dark afterwards. And then there's the fact that I now need to reserve a lane at the pool 48 hours in advance because the demand is greater due to the fly-in and roosting habits of our snowbirds. And I don't see Hobie today, but I need to say snow and rainbirds. I notice changes every time I go grocery shopping or get gas that reflect larger changes in our society. I see change every time I come to MVUU. New faces and more people to meet and welcome, and that is indeed a change that we welcome. And there are other, more profound changes that have become so obvious now. The possibility of another wave of the pandemic when a new variant is discovered. The lack of civility in public discourse. Just watch the political ads that are on TV right now. The mad rush to pin the blame on someone, to have a scapegoat. The threats to world order and democracy. And perhaps changes in leadership in a little more than 2 weeks. It was the Greek philosopher Heraclitus who long ago said that the only constant is change. As we continue our service today, we will be talking about new beginnings and change. But first, the chalice lighting. Today, I am using an excerpt from a poem by Ophelia Zepeda, who is Tohono O'odham. As we explore our theme of change in the desert, I am reminded that during the pandemic, we always did a land acknowledgement at the beginning of our services, realizing, in fact, that this beautiful Sonoran desert we call home doesn't really belong to us, but rather recognizing the role of the indigenous people who lived here long before it was settled by our ancestors. And this poem by Ophelia Zepeda reflects that. The true story of this place recalls people walking deserts all their lives and continuing today, if only in their dreams. The true story is ringing in their footsteps in a place so quiet they can hear their blood moving through their veins. The stories give shape to the mountains encircling this place and to the desert in all its beauty.
Let's stand together and sing. There we go, and...
Well, good morning. Some of you may not know that I'm Richard Kopp, and Peter Beshkehazy and I are here to speak with you this morning because tomorrow, October 24, is United Nations Day, marking the 77th anniversary of its founding in 1945. First, I'd like to remark a word of welcome to all of you who joined our congregation and rejoined our congregation last Sunday. I say that in part because I first crossed a Unitarian congregation threshold 60 years ago. Wow. So you have a long ways to go, and good travels I trust you will have. For about 20 years of that time with UUs, I worked with the UN office, the Unitarian Universalist United Nations office, and later then with the UU Peace Ministry Network. It's not surprising that Unitarians were on the scene in New York, supporting the UN from its earliest days there in 1946. And it was from their efforts as they grew that the UUNO developed in 1962. To this day, the UUNO continues with its offices at the Church Center on First Avenue across from UN headquarters in New York. Now, as we all know, or most of us know who are old enough, the UN rose out of the death and destruction of World War II. The 51 countries who signed the charter committed their governments to maintain international peace and security, to develop friendly relations among nations, and to promote social progress, better living standards, and human rights. There's no doubt in my mind that the principles of the United Nations are expressed in our strongly held UU beliefs and values, and not only in our sixth principle, the goal of a world community with peace, liberty, and justice. For me, all 7 of our UU principles express the ideals and values of the United Nations. Take, for example, our second principle, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. Most notably, actions taken at the UN entail the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, adopted way back in 1948. And later in the year 2000, the UN Millennium Declaration was signed to combat poverty, hunger, disease, illiteracy, environmental degradation, and discrimination against women. And yet our world, as we know, continues to suffer from the ancient sorrows of pestilence, famine, and war, to which we need to add now climate change. Most immediate, we are facing a world community divided by the current rising of so-called great powers who claim the rightness of gaining or regaining domination over their neighboring states using their political, economic, and military power. This United Nations Day calls us not to easy celebration, but to hard determination to find political and moral actions, sacrifices and accommodations that we also must make to ease the threats and to nurture again how is it that we all can live on this planet in peace and with justice. And Peter is going to tell us more about what UUs are currently doing and can do. Peter?
Good morning. This year, the UU United Nations Office has designated the theme of displacement and human rights, all in for climate justice. This dovetails, as Richard was saying, with the 6th UU principle and all of our principles. The UN deals with this issue through action on the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the Organization for Migration, and the WHO, the World Health Organization. The UN continues to be of great importance to us, to the United States, and a couple of years ago, we contributed $11.6 billion to the UN budget, about a quarter of the total budget. My work in the U.S. Foreign Service included participating in UN peace conferences in Geneva and Madrid as a press officer to the U.S. delegation. I could see firsthand the effectiveness of the UN in meeting some of its own principles and goals. The UU-UN theme this year is also very relevant for the Baha'i Four congregations because of the issue of immigration and migration of peoples converges just about an hour south of MVUU at the US-Mexico border. For Sky Island UU, And Borderlands UU, the border is even much, much closer. The issue of migrants is critical worldwide, with tens of millions of migrants displaced. At our border, we have migrants from Haiti and Venezuela and elsewhere. Bringing the issue closer to home, MVUU has been assisting asylum seekers from Haiti in cooperation with Contigo. As a final note, we really do need comprehensive immigration legislation and climate change legislation to start to address some of the key issues and causes of migration. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter and Richard. And we also have another former Foreign Service officer in our congregation, John Wilcox. And this got turned around, so bear with me. Okay. So we're coming to the topic of new beginnings. We have all had new beginnings of one kind or another in our lives. For some of you, this may be joining MVUU and making the intentional choice to be part of our community. For others, it may be relocating to Tucson from the place where we had our careers and raised our children. Many of us have experienced unwelcome or unanticipated new beginnings after the end of a relationship because of a death or a relocation because of a job. This poem by John O'Donohue talks about new beginnings, and that is the title of this poem. In out-of-the-way places of the heart, where your thoughts never think to wander, this has been quietly forming, waiting until you were ready to change. For a long time, it has watched your desire, feeling the emptiness growing inside you, noticing how you willed yourself on, still unable to leave what you had outgrown. It watched you play with the seduction of safety and the gray promises that sameness whispered. Heard the waves of turmoil and relent, rise and relent, wondered, would you always live like this? Then the delight when your courage kindled, and out you stepped onto new ground, your eyes young again, with energy and dream, a path of plenitude opening before you. Though your destination is not yet clear, you can trust the promise of this opening. Unfurl yourself into the grace of beginning that is at one with your life's desire. Awaken your spirit to adventure. Hold nothing back. Learn to find ease in risk. Soon you will home in a new rhythm, for your soul senses the world that awaits you. We'll now enter into a short period of meditation as we contemplate the new beginnings of our lives, and I'm going to guide you through this meditation. Is there a part of your life where you feel you need to make a new beginning? Why is this new beginning necessary? Does this possibility make you joyful or sad? Was it difficult to leave what you have outgrown? Can you trust the promise of this new beginning? Is your courage kindled enough to make this new beginning? What would help you to find ease in taking this risk? Thank you.
Is this mic live? Yeah. This is a song about a chain link fence and its transformation. Joe was far from an optimist. He lived alone, had no friends. In an adobe on an acre of Sonoran desert, surrounded by a chain link fence. He had a lop-eared dog named Trouble. His neighbors never came to call. Staring out at the world through his chain link fence, he felt stuck behind a prison wall. One evening he said to Trouble, "I feel miserable and out of luck." He put up a sign on his chain link fence that said, "This whole world sucks!" Exclamation point in heavy black magic marker. Well, next morning, something looked different on the sign that he had made. Over the exclamation point, a question mark in pink glitter paint was sprayed. And on the chain link fence were little cardboard signs where no signs used to be. Each had a picture of a watering can that said, "Please water me." Joe looked at the signs and shrugged his shoulders, got out his watering can. He watered the base of the chain link fence like a frugal Arizona man. Out here, you got to be intentional about your water use. In a few days, there was a line of green. In a few weeks, flowers appeared. Bright orange poppies, purple morning glories, penstemons with burgundy beards. The flowers climbed high on the chain link fence in a riot of colorful vines. That chain link fence became a wall of flowers and covered up his sign. Joe scratched Trouble's ears and considered deeply his varicolorous view. Yep, it's when you find fresh roadkill, you gotta fix up a rattlesnake stew. What'd you expect in Arizona? Possums? Armadillos? Moose? Not hardly. Well, Joe still ain't no optimist, though he smiles from time to time. He chats with his neighbors, they sure like the flowers, and shares a beer over the vines. He changed his dog's name from Trouble to Sam, though why, he couldn't say. He now sees the world through a fence of flowers. He waters carefully every day. Well, he waters them every day. Yes, he does.
It's so wonderful to be here. The last time I was here, the four ministers of the Baja Four did parts of a Baja Four virtual service here. Reverend Matthew ran his bike up and down on up on the balcony. Reverend Sam arrived on her bike. We all lit the chalice together. It's really nice to see how much you've progressed and inhabited the space, all the cute signs. Really lovely to be here. My father was Foreign Service, as was my grandfather and my sister. I am really hoping this next generation of nieces and nephews, maybe my own children, one of them will carry the torch and move forward into that. And I love adventures, but I've been finding them here in Arizona for 17 years. When you travel between Douglas and beyond Sonoyta, every town is different. It's almost like a different country and culture. I worked in hospice, and I still do, just a lot less. It's almost 10 years now. And I've had a lot of adventures in hospice. But one day, as I was traveling from a meeting in Tucson to Douglas, I had to make this large transition because I needed to meet a new family, a new patient. I got a phone call from my office, and they said, the daughter wants you to perform an exorcism. I'm like, no time to go home and grab the Jordan River water my parents collected. My mother was baptized with some in a Unitarian church in the 20s, so they made sure to get some in the 80s. No time, I have no incense on me. What do I do? I said, okay, and I thought about it the whole way. And I started to worry, what if I did something wrong and I did dislodge some kind of evil spirit and it stuck to me and came home with me and terrorized my children, right? I don't know what to do. I have been asked again to provide exorcism services, so that time I could call a priest. And he let me know exorcism, at least in this part of Arizona, starts with a home blessing, and then if it really doesn't work, only the bishop knows who the exorcist is in his area, and that person gets called on. So I'm driving and I'm thinking and I'm really wondering, and I had this moment of realization. Well, I can only be myself, and what I believe in is love, right? When I do weddings, and I have agnostics and atheists and Christians and weirdos in my family, the only thing I require is that I be able to talk about human love. There's no point in doing a ceremony if you don't believe in that, right? And I have seen it do amazing things. Friends have woken up uneasy and checked in with me, and I was very unhappy. I have felt very, very sad and found out later, twice now, that a dear family friend had died. I had no clue about. I believe human love has these strange superpowers, right? So I thought, well, I'll go there, and I don't think it's the patient, I think it's her house, and I'll walk around and I'll pour love and intention out, and maybe that will help. When I got there, I talked with the daughter, and she said, yes, strange things happen here and there and in the kitchen. Do something. And then she got a phone call. So I started, without her noticing, I had no bells and whistles, incense, or holy water. I went and I thought deeply over each spot, and I even extended good wishes to whatever unrest was there. If there was a spirit, that it find release and peace. And then when I came to visit the next time, the daughter said, yeah, huge water bottles are no longer launching themselves off our shelves. And my mother is more at peace. And actually, it's my mother. She's a really restless spirit. I think she called all these spirits into the house, kind of like a teenage poltergeist caller in her 80s. So she was happy, and I felt like I had done my bit. And it reaffirmed for me the importance of love. And when I look on your website and I see you have 3 spheres to your ministry, the spiritual path, fellowship, and justice outreach, I know you are people who value love. Fellowship is really important. I think the one thing churches offer, so many other places can't, is community. And community is an endangered entity, I think, in our world. I grew up, moving around, always going back to the same church that became for me a small town in Washington, D.C., and loads of grandparents from that greatest generation and before. Church offers something precious, which is community. Sometimes people complain, that church is just a social club. Well, it's only a social club if you come to a table and there's no room for you. It's one thing if you gather with people you haven't seen and you love and you want to spend time with, as long as you welcome others to come sit with you too, right? It's a community that sees beyond itself. And obviously, emphasizing spiritual path is a way to constantly remind yourselves of what really matters, living a well thought out, intentional life. How can I inject more compassion and presence and love? And I love what you say about justice, that Dr. Cornel West says justice is what love looks like in public. And I really don't think you can do any of those 3 spheres without the others. I don't think you can do justice without vision, spirit, or community. It's really important to work with people and understand and walk alongside. Yesterday, I went to the Unitarian Universalist Justice Arizona, UU Jazz Issues and Action Day, and found myself out with Reverend Bethany, way beyond both of our comfort zones, knocking on people's houses to talk about Proposition 209. It's kind of a no-brainer. My husband and I vote differently, but we voted yes together on that because it's ending predatory collection practices about medical debt. We were really nervous. We both thought writing our sermons would be better than doing this. But 2 things happened. Either people didn't answer and we could just leave literature. Phew. The 5th house answered. And a woman, she had these little laughing witches as we walked up. And she said, yeah, they startled me too. She was really friendly. Of course she supported Prop 209, and she thanked us for doing this lobbying work, this knocking on doors, which is no fun. We went to another house eventually. Someone greeted us and said, yes, of course I'm voting for it. And then we found a woman who knew nothing about it. She was a social worker. She was very excited it existed, and she was going to talk her husband into it, maybe even do his ballot for him. And then we got to a yard sale of 20, maybe 30, early 30-somethings, about 7 young people. And they had never heard of this. They were really excited it existed, and we handed them literature. We had encountered in our living what Toy from UU Jazz had said all morning. Organizing is about relationship. It's about connecting, connecting, connecting. And we had done that in a really powerful way. Reverend Bethany might do it again sometime, and I would if I could go with her. But you can't have any of your spheres, I think, without each other. And I think it's really, really important to have community, to help you through change. Change evokes multiple emotions, doesn't it? Right now, because of the pandemic, we've been forced to live through change. How many of you are exhausted? Right? Change can bring exhaustion. Now, one of my favorite people, who's also one of Reverend Matthew's, Adrienne Marie Brown, talks about the importance of feeling feelings, even if we think they're negative, right? She talks about time-traveling emotions. When she was in her 20s, she stuffed them down, and then they'd come back unexpectedly, force her to sob. Now she knows in real time she can live through them, let them go through her. She says, when I feel them and I have less shame, I can say no to things that are a waste of my time. I can spend time, this precious time, as I wish to. So it's important to face all the emotions that change brings up. There's also fear, right? And Maslow, who talks about the hierarchy of needs, says, growth is an endless series of daily choices. And we can decide to go back into safety or to go forward. Growth must be chosen again and again. Fear must be overcome again and again. So we can feel fear, we can feel exhaustion, we can feel anger about change. Some of the good feelings about change are difficult too. How many of you have found yourself feeling at home, feeling like the world was kind of right, and wondered when the other shoe's gonna drop, right? But it's important to feel all those things and to feel them in community. When I went to seminary, I was going off, I had a scholarship, I was doing something exciting, I was engaged, and 2 weeks later, I found out my dad had a brain tumor. And I was pretty much alone in Chicago. My family was in DC, and didn't know how to wade through it alone. My father ended up dying just a few months later, and when I went back, I thought I needed to be strong, independent, continue my studies, and I couldn't think straight. Because for me, the work in seminary, the work of preaching, you have to connect your heart and your head and your life and everything. And if you've shoved down those emotions, just like Adrienne Marie Brown did, your thinking's gonna be really weird, I can tell you. And I didn't realize how much I needed community. My second year there, I found 4 women friends. The daughter of one of them connected with me this morning. But I had 4 women friends, and I realized I wish I had gone to a women's college. When there was a sexual assault on my campus, we gathered as a registrar, a professor, 3 other students, all women, with Marie Fortune, who's written about sexual abuse and surviving it. And we healed each other in community. It's really important that when you're facing those scary feelings, you find some way to do it. You can be a community of one inside yourself if you're a really strong introvert, right? Some people journal, but I think most of us find we're less crazy when we do it together. And that's why I think we have all these human rituals around change, right? When a baby emerges into a family, do we ignore that? Or do we bring presents? Do we have baby dedications and brises and baptisms? This huge change has happened to a family. Whether it's their first child or their 10th, the family is changed. And I think the parents want to know this baby belongs to something bigger. If something happens to us, there are others to take care of them. I had just read that in the Catholic Church, it's okay to be baptized later, but there's such fear that our baby might die, end up in limbo, which, by the way, they don't believe anymore, that we want to protect them with a baptism, make them part of God's family, give them a sealing, in baptism. So families want to know there's a larger community, and they want to know their kid is seen. I really think they want to know that. Elizabeth Edwards, the wife of John Edwards, who wrote beautiful books, wrote in Amazing Graces after the death of her son, very suddenly at 16. She learned what parents need when they've lost a child. And one thing is they need to know their child leaves a legacy. That even the future has been stolen, but they made some impact while they were here. And so that's why often people give scholarships in the name of a child, so they make an impact. When Anne Morrow Lindbergh's baby was kidnapped, she wrote about it in Hour of Gold and Hour of Lead. She came to this moment of grieving and grieving when she realized he had done so much in his short life, dying before he was 2. He meant a lot to her father before her father died, to her mother after her father died suddenly, and he'd made them a family. She and her husband really hadn't been that family for other children. It was important that there's a legacy. And when we gather to celebrate a child, we see the child. We see its possibilities, its impact. What are weddings, really? But a way of saying that the couple or more in polyamory, right, want the community to acknowledge this new entity. How many of you have ever felt disturbed by being invited or not invited to a wedding? No, it's never bothered you? It might have bothered you, right? I got disinvited to my best friends because we roomed together in high school and college. We dreamed of this day. But she and her husband chose the chapel where they both were baptized, and it was too small to hold everyone. But I didn't see her for 9 years after, because I think weddings show you what role you have in this new entity. Do I have a place in the future of this new family, right? And house blessings always include a little exorcism, at least everyone I found online, which is great. As you're entering a new house, release anything that's holding you back, anything negative, right? How about memorial services? Isn't that a way to reanimate in community this person you love, to learn how to live without them physically there, but still so much here and giving you advice and humor, right? We go through changes together in community. But what happens when it's your community that's changing? When a place you go to find a sense of home and solidarity and solidity, what if it's moving under your feet? What if you come to church and you don't recognize all those new faces? Do you have a future in this new entity? What about when you have a new minister, a new building, all these new people? What happens when you have them all at once? I think you need those 3 spheres that you name. You need, first of all, I think, to feel any feeling you have. It is important that you are here and present and whole. If you're alarmed by all the people, if you're hopeful because of all, whatever you feel, that's fine. And then I think there's a moment where, as with John O'Donohue and Maslow, you choose the growth. You accept the excitement. You move forward out of fear. And then you need to know, who are you? What is our core? What are we carrying forward? What really matters to us as a church? And change is an opportunity to reaffirm that over and over again. My church in Sierra Vista moved 8 times before they got a building, right? You know what it's like to move and move and move in the wilderness. And that's when you find who you are, what really matters to you. Adrienne Marie Brown talks about intentional adaptation. She says that's when you choose change. And It's the orientation and movement towards life, towards longing. It's made graceful in the act of adaptation. It's changing while staying in touch with your deeper meaning and longing, with who you are, right? My seminary in Chicago used to be really near Meadville Lombard, the UU seminary. I could walk between the two. We shared a librarian. But since then, Meadville Lombard has moved closer to downtown, and we've moved further south because the University of Chicago wanted our building and our land and gave us money to build. We have a good endowment. There are times I get really sad about our old buildings. Did we bring that piece of rock from Plymouth Rock in England and Massachusetts? Did we bring the ashes of our hallowed saints interred in our cloisters? Do bats still hang out over the weekends in our bizarre rooms? Okay, so maybe the move is a good one. And what helps me is to realize at our core, my seminary has always been cutting edge, able to change. We're like a small sailboat able to tack, and the University of Chicago is a huge ocean liner that has to be moved slowly. You know, if you want to change study, it's got to be approved, it's got to be acceptable, they have to keep their status and reputation. We don't care, we just change in my little seminary. So moving to a building, yeah, we don't have dorms anymore, but we really don't need them. And we have a building that's IT capable and doesn't have bats on the weekend and is cutting edge. And that is who we are. So as you all face that kind of change here in the life of the church, there are great rituals to acknowledge that. You can welcome a new minister, obviously with an installation ceremony. Celebrate your new building with a building dedication, right? Welcome your new members with special services, as you have done. But, you know, it's really unusual to do all three at once. So I thought I'd do an impromptu ritual right now. And if I had daughters, I'd have something with me I could use. Because we're Unitarian Universalist, I want to imagine that we are all fairy godmothers, coming to something new, like a baptism, a birth, this wonderful new minister you have, this new possibility for imagining ministry, sharing love in action in the world and here. What would you do? What would you do with your wand? What would you give as skill sets? What blessings would you give? Would it be beauty, the ability to speak multiple languages, patience, wisdom? And what would you foresee for this space and your work together and outside it? I'm just going to give you a moment to imagine your wands, bless each other, the space, your ministry, right now. Blessed be, and may it be so.
For those of you here, if you'd like to follow along, the hymn is number 1028 in the Teal books. 1028.
It's in 5/8. Nobody panic.
Oh, thank you. Don't make me throw things.
From the light of days remembered burns a beacon bright and clear, guiding hands and hearts and spirits into faith set free from fear. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the stories of our living rings a song both brave and free, calling pilgrims still to witness to the life of liberty. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the dreams of youthful vision comes a new prophetic voice, which demands a deeper justice built by our courageous choice. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion need to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. Yeah.
Good morning. I'm Monica Bauer, a member of your PA team, and we have just a few announcements this morning, and beginning with our president, Tom Sawyer. I'm going to call him up to make an announcement.
Thanks, Monica. I wanted to, in the spirit of our service this morning, talk a little bit with you about a new endeavor that we're undertaking. You will notice as you go into the social hall, the Oasis room after the service, there is a chart up by the bulletin board, and that chart shows a new parking plan for this congregation. We have, as part of the Building and Grounds Committee, part of the board, we've been working diligently to figure out how to increase the number of spaces here, and I think we've come up with a very good plan. But I will be out by that chart, and I'll be happy to answer your questions. So please stop by while you're getting your cup of coffee or whatever, and if you have any questions or any comments, I'd be happy to talk to you about them. But a new parking plan in this new space, which we're going to add about 20 to 25 new spaces.
Thank you so much, Tom, for that exciting announcement about change. Very, very good. And we all, on behalf of all of MVUU here gathered and also at home on Zoom, we want to thank Reverend Tina for her wonderful message this morning. When the service is over, you're all invited to join us for coffee out there. There are things to eat and things to drink, and there are wooden bowls. There are 2 wooden bowls, and they are for donations in lieu of an offertory. So outside you'll find 2 wooden bowls. One is for the work of the church. Please put your donation there to help us in our ministries here. And the other one is the woven basket for our justice partner, which is Jazz, yay, which we heard about today. So thank you for that. And as we begin to conclude our service and come to that time where we extinguish our chalice, I wrote a little poem/prayer just for you, beloved community. It's called Desert Time Prayer. We come to the desert to escape time, as it was, as it ever shall be, so it seems. The saguaros hoard raindrops, and rabbits seek shade, as it always was, as it ever shall be, so it seems. The sky so wide, the stars so close, as it always was, as it ever shall be, so it seems. Look closer at the desert. It's never the same. It evolves, adapts, as it ever will be. Even the permanent sky is a fiction. It evolves, adapts, as it ever will be. As we reconnect ourselves to the desert, as it evolves, adapts, as it ever will be, we are both the same and new, same and new, as it always was, as it ever shall be. And let the people say, amen.